Bonjour, hello, habari. Bienvenue à tous. Merci de votre participation. Je m'appelle Paul Curry. Je suis un officier systèmes urbains de ICLI Africa. Pour écouter notre webinaire en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français. N'hésitez pas à poser toutes vos questions en français. Nous vous souhaitons un excellent webinaire. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Curry. I'm a Senior Professional Officer with ICLI Africa in Urban Systems. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the second of our webinars as part of the African City Food Month campaign. This week, our focus is on resilient cities, as we'll see in a moment. And we're sure it's going to be an excellent webinar going forward. This webinar forms part of the Rise Africa roadmap and is part of ICLI Africa's webinar series on building sustainable African cities during and after a pandemic. Today's webinar is entitled Food, Climate, and COVID-19, and we will be hearing stories directly from our cities. Before we begin, I would just like to remind you of the webinar protocols. This webinar is being recorded, and therefore by joining the webinar, you are consenting to be recorded. We would welcome great discussion in our chat boxes and in the question and answer boxes, which can be found at the bottom of the Zoom platform. When we get to our discussion period, we will welcome everyone to unmute and share their video to ask some of the questions in a more interactive manner. In the event of a dropped speaker due to internet, please do bear with us as we see if they can continue or if we move to the next speakers. So as we begin, I would like to invite everyone to introduce themselves in the chat boxes. We find this would be a great way just to see the great diversity that we have joining us. As a fun introduction to our food webinars, we have great representation of people who like rice as their favorite food, chicken, fish, pounded foods, vegetables, fruits, yam, beans, and many more. From our cities, we can see we're represented from Cape Town, Rome, Johannesburg, Antananarivo, Accra, Yaoundé, Abidjan, Dakar, Banjul, Gombe, Kisumu, Pretoria, Montpellier, Abuja, Paris, Kampala, and many more. And may I note in the chat when you're introducing yourselves, make sure to tick the box which says to all panelists and to all attendees so that everyone who's on the webinar can see who you are. This is an overview of African City Food Month. As I said, we're in week 2, which is resilient food systems. We'd like to invite you to share your insights on food systems in your city by using the African City Food Month hashtag. These can be videos, case studies, a tweet, a thought piece that you would like to write, and we would really like to see some great movement around food systems. We would also like to share some thanks with our partners. This campaign is brought to you by ICLI, FAO, and RUAF, with supporting partners in the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, Ricolto, African Centre for Cities, WWF, the South African Urban Food and Farming Trust, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So with those words of welcome, we trust this is going to be an interactive webinar, and we hope to have a lot of time towards the end to really tangle with some very difficult questions. The person who's going to be holding us in this discussion is my colleague, Solofine Nekesa. She's a professional officer in urban systems with ICLI Africa, and it's a pleasure to work with her on issues of food, circularity, building energy efficiency in our cities. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Solofine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that introduction. I think I'd like to request Agostino to please mute the mic. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. We are glad that you could join us this afternoon on our second webinar in a series for the African City Food Month. And from wherever you are, you're welcome, and thanks for joining us. As Paul has introduced, I am Solofine Nekesa, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. So for today's webinar, we would like to provide a space for African cities to share their experiences and also strategies for a more resilient urban food system. And that is in the short run, but then also in the long run. So on this topic, we'll get insights shared from our food campaign partners at FAO, and they'll share on the outcomes from the food systems and COVID-19 questionnaire. Then we'll also get some insights from municipal leaders at the front line and officials. That is, today we have officials from Antananarivo, from Congo Brazzaville, from Dakar in Senegal, from Quelimane in Mozambique, Kampala and Kisumu. You know, it's quite an interesting collection of different cities on the African continent, and it's going to be very good hearing their different experiences. And it's important to know that during this time, city officials have been at the front line of ensuring that the city is alive and functioning during and after the COVID pandemic. And they ensure that this is done in a safe and equitable manner. So discussions will also go beyond the impact and response to the COVID-19 pandemic to more long-term approaches and strategies for ensuring continued access to nutritious food in the face of climate change and then also political shocks. So our presenters today will reflect on two important questions. One of them is, how has your city been attempting to improve food resilience in the long and in the short term? And the second important question will be, how has COVID-19 affected and or reinforced these approaches? So we are really looking forward to these discussions, and we hope that you can engage with us during the webinar. Please use the chat function in the question and answer section so that we can hear what you have to say, and then you can direct your questions directly to the presenters. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jamie Morrison. Dr. Jamie is the Director and Strategic Program Leader for the Food Systems Program and the Food and Agriculture Organization. Jamie has more than 25 years of experience in the provision of research, capacity development, and technical assistance in relation to the impact of trade and economic policy reform on food security during processes of structural transformation. He will also analyze responses from over 200 municipalities in Africa to COVID-19, examining their challenges and innovative actions. Welcome to the presentation, Jamie. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Solafina, and good afternoon to everybody joining today. I'd like to start by thanking colleagues from the FAO Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa and ICLE Africa for launching the campaign African City Food Month, which is clearly strengthening the connection with local governments from African cities and with local actors to better understand the needs, the challenges, and the opportunities at the urban level. Now, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is disrupting urban food systems worldwide, affecting food security and nutrition of the urban populations. The management of the crisis by city and local governments can play a major role in preventing the spread of the virus, but at the same time could mitigate the disruptions to food systems and the negative effects on vulnerable populations, which are being caused by some of the more restrictive measures. It's therefore important to map, and I think someone needs to mute. It's also important to map the municipal responses to the emergency and to analyse progress and setbacks in managing disruptions in urban food systems and any of the related implications for food security and nutrition. So today I'm pleased to share with you the initial results of a survey which were administered by FAO during April and May 2020 to better understand the role that cities and local governments are playing in facing the COVID crisis. And in this presentation, I want to highlight the key insights based on the responses that we received from African cities. Sorry, my slide is not moving forward. Look at what's happening. Okay, thank you. So of the 860 responses that we received globally, 223 were from African cities. from 202 cities across 20 countries in the continent, as shown on the map on the screen. 49% of the responses that we received from Africa were from local authorities, while the remaining responses were from academia, researchers, NGOs, and national governments. And although the sample may not be statistically representative, the large number of responses clearly demonstrates that cities and local governments are playing a crucial role in mitigating the effects of COVID-19 on food systems. And we're confident from what we've seen that they can also play a major role in building back better food systems if we can provide proper support and authority. So for the purpose of the analysis, which I'll show over the next few slides, we've classified the responding cities into 5 categories. From, on the one hand, large cities with populations exceeding 5 million, to at the other end of the spectrum, villages with populations of less than 5,000 inhabitants. And I think, as you'll see, this gives quite a nice insight into the variation across impacts and responses and measures across these different geographies and city size distributions. So just to give a brief outline of the presentation. I'm sorry, I seem to be having a delay. Solafina, I don't know if you can see which slide you can see, but I seem to be having a delay in my...
So I'm still on the geographic distribution of survey responses.
On the map, okay. Yeah, apologies for this. It was working perfectly, of course, beforehand. Let me try this.
All right, we've moved to the next
Okay.
slide.
So this slide just provides a brief outline of the presentation I'll give. Firstly, I'll look at the restrictive measures that we used and the effects on urban food systems and food access. Secondly, I'll look at the municipal responses for mitigating food system disruptions and ensuring access to food for all. I'll then turn to some of the highlights on the challenges and opportunities that we discovered through the survey, and finally end with some of the recommendations which came from the cities themselves as to how we can build back better. So firstly, what measures have mostly affected urban food systems in African cities during the pandemic? I think what we see from this radar graph, if you look at the pattern, the red line is Africa, and the other line is the rest of the world. So in looking at the pattern, we see a great level of similarity in terms of the restrictive measures that were used in Africa as was seen worldwide. And in particular, it was the closure of schools and the consequence of suspension of school meals, which was reported as the main issue by 81% of African respondents. And 2 specific points to be highlighted. Firstly, restrictions of food markets and food distribution points has had a significant effect on food systems. But secondly, the closure of restaurants and canteens seems to be less problematic than we saw elsewhere in different regions. And this is possibly because people have other informal alternatives for eating outside the house. In terms of the effects that we detected at city level as a result of these restrictive measures, African responses, again with the red curve, indicate that according to the respondents, urban food systems in African cities are much more affected by the measures taken to combat the pandemic when compared to other cities in other regions of the world. And our analysis suggests that it's the combination of panic buying, increased food losses, shortages of basic foods, which has led to higher prices of food baskets, and as a result, compromising access to staple and fresh foods. And a result of this has been an increase in the food insecurity of the most vulnerable, particularly in urban areas. So what the crisis has done effectively is to reveal the fragility of urban food systems in Africa, which was already evident before the pandemic hit. but which I think we really need to take into account when we're looking at response measures. So if I turn now to the effects of the restrictive measures by city size, what we found was that the analysis highlighted that the small African towns, this time the blue line in the graph, which appears much more resilient, it's much closer to the center of the graph. So the impacts were less felt than in larger urban conurbations. And possible reasons for this could be, firstly, better linkages between rural and urban areas. Secondly, a better understanding of the food system and related stakeholders because of that proximity. And thirdly, better coordination amongst social and economic actors working at that smaller scale. Turning now to the measures that have been taken by municipalities to ensure access to food for all. In the graph, you can see, again, the African curve in red is closer to the center of the graph. So lower rates for the suggested measures compared to other cities in the world. So in other words, what we're seeing here is that African cities were less able to implement measures to mitigate the effects of the pandemic than cities in other regions. And in particular, it was a lack of action pronounced in the case of school meals deliveries, food delivery to vulnerable households, which stood out. And implementing alternative ways to provide such services seems to be more difficult for African cities. Perhaps this is due to a lack of financial resources, a lack of coordination, food governance systems within cities, or it could be a lack of connection with food banks, which tend to be much more developed in other regions of the world. So in conclusion, looking across the effects in African cities, we find that local governments in Africa face greater challenges in implementing specific measures than in other regions. Food shortages, particularly in cities in landlocked countries, have been more evident. Transportation and storage facilities have been less apparent, or at least the ability to upscale in the pandemic in terms of storage needs. And also in the food production sector, there's been a chronic lack of infrastructure which has increased vulnerability situation of small farmers in terms of their ability to get food towards urban markets. The lack of resources, as I've mentioned before, to a certain extent may be due to a lack of coordination between national and regional governments. The majority of cities indicated having few or no means of mobilizing additional resources. There was a limited ability to implement social protection policies. But on the other hand, we found that cities did leverage actions from local actors. So for example, engaging with NGOs, slum or migrant associations, establishing and strengthening local coordination with civil society charities, religious groups and volunteers. And what we saw in particular was the role that the informal sector has played as a lever for improving levels of innovation and resilience. In terms of the recommendations for how we move forward as we move out of the COVID pandemic situation, how can we build on what's happening during the pandemic to ensure that food systems are more resilient and more inclusive in the future? And we received several recommendations from respondents, and the ones on the graph are just a sample of those. Many respondents highlighted the importance of strengthening holistic, multi-stakeholder and multi-sectorial approach for managing urban food systems. They also mentioned the development of evidence base as being critical for inclusive policy and plans on food system preparedness and resilience to such shocks and extreme events. The facilitation of access to food for the most vulnerable through social protection programs, complemented where possible by efficient and innovative food distribution, such as inclusive food delivery and e-commerce. Respondents also highlighted that urban and peri-urban production and short supply chains can provide an opportunity to build more resilient urban food systems, which we're currently not taking advantage of. And finally, pointed out the role, as I was saying before, of the informal sector in addressing crisis situations by keeping food supply chains functioning. For example, in the provision of transportation for food distribution. So this mapping of municipal responses to the emergency situation has helped us to strengthen the evidence base on which we can support countries along with our partners in building policies and programs to deal with the crisis, but also to build back better. It's been particularly useful in informing FAO's Urban Food Agenda program, through which we've been raising the profile of cities and local government actions. We're actively supporting cities and local governments currently in more than 20 countries. And our Food Agenda website, which has been recently launched, has a new dedicated section to COVID-19, which is now online with the FAO Urban Action Platform. And this platform itself provides a good opportunity to collate practical evidence and experience from cities around the world to understand how different cities are coping with the impacts of the environment. So on this slide, you'll see that there are hyperlinks to FAO's corporate webpage, and I understand that the presentation will be shared with you so that you can take advantage of that. And finally, I'd just like to make the point that we feel it's very important for FAO that we build a network of cities for systematic and regular dialogue in supporting the development of urban food systems. And to that extent, I'd conclude by announcing that we hope very shortly to publish a policy brief which has been developed by the FAO Urban Food Agenda team, and which will provide a lot more details on the analysis of the survey which I've discussed today. So thank you very much, and apologies for the slight hitches with the PowerPoint.
No, thank you very much, Jamie, for your presentation, and I'm glad that we're able to sort out the glitches, and I think a presentation that shows that it unfolds as it happens. But some important reflection from your presentation, something you noted was that the larger cities are not as resilient as the smaller cities. So I think during our discussion and then the question and answer section, these are some of the points that we'd like to reflect upon, what is making larger cities less resilient and what is making the smaller cities able to cope with disasters. And so moving on to our next speaker, that is Mayor Araujo from Quelimane. I would like to also reflect what are the responses to the pandemic, that the city of Quelimane in Mozambique has been able to adopt. And also the mayor will reflect on some of the work of the UNA costs to improve Quelimane's climate adaptation efforts. Welcome, Mayor, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Hello, good afternoon, Solofina. Thanks a lot to all of you for inviting us to share our experiences and COVID. Allow me first of all to mention that Quelimane City is the capital of Zambezia province, and Zambezia province is one of the 10 provinces in Mozambique, and the city itself has more than 400,000 inhabitants. And as I was mentioning, among the 10 Mozambican provinces, Zambezia provinces, to which Quelimane is the capital, is about 6 million inhabitants. So it's the second biggest province in terms of population, but also it's the second biggest in terms of geographical area. 40 years ago, this province was the basket of the country, actually contributing up to more than 30% of GDP. And this contribution was basically coming from the agro industry, which contributed, as I mentioned, for more than 30 to 35% of Mozambique's GDP. And so we had from cotton to rice production and processing, coconut plantation, which was considered at some point as one of the biggest in the world. So most of the economy of the province and most of the employment were coming from the agro-processing sector. But unfortunately, due to a yellow disease, which affected the coconut plantation, actually it decimated entirely. So now the big companies that were running these coconut plantations literally closed up. They were bankrupt. Of course, one reason was the mismanagement in the post-independence period when most of the economy was nationalized. But also, as most of you may know, Mozambique experienced a 16-year civil war. So those two factors, mismanagement, central planned economy, and the war wiped out all the economic sector of the province, thus creating a lot of insecurity, food insecurity in the province. Currently, UN data states that between 45 to 55% of the province's inhabitants are undernourished. That's a huge amount, and as you can imagine, it affects the well-being of the population. So the food security crisis has been, the province has been facing an insecurity, but also with the arrival of COVID, it affected not only the general population, but mainly the most vulnerable, mainly the young, the youth, women. Those are the three main vulnerable groups that were affected by, first of all, by the food insecurity, but now by the combined impact of both the food security crisis and COVID. So since the last 2 years, the municipality has been working with major national and international partners to raise the profile, but also to deal with the food insecurity that has been affecting the city. So we have been working with both Milan municipality and in Italy in two big projects. One project is called Kelimane Limpa, and the other one is called Kelimane Agricola, where we work across the value chain by training local farmers, by giving them new tools and new techniques. We also use waste, solid waste and other rubbish as a compost, as a raw material for compost. And then we distribute the compost to farmers in order to allow them to increase the productivity of their farms. By doing that, we manage to improve the food output, not only in terms of quantity, but also the quality of their produce, therefore affecting or reducing the levels of malnourishment, but also the level of food insecurity. We have been working with ICLEI regional office in Cape Town to implement other projects and other measures so that we can improve the level of nutrition, as I mentioned, not only by training farmers, but also by distributing compost to these farmers and we are creating, for example, in the locations and in several schools, we create environmental and food security clubs where these clubs learn these techniques and then they spread them with the farmers, not only in the locations, but also with these vulnerable groups.
May I would like to please request you to wrap up the presentation and some key takeaways from your presentation.
What we learned from this project is that it's important for local governments to take the lead in this challenge, because local governments, we are in the forefront of not only environmentally climate change challenges, but actually we have got the legitimacy, but also we have got the proximity. So by linking the issue of legitimacy and the proximity, then we are able of dealing with the most challenging issues that any society may face. So it's very important that local government take the necessary steps and also liaise with other stakeholders, both at regional level, at national level, but also at international level, to exchange experiences and take and learn from each other in addressing these challenges that we all face. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation and insight on what Kilimane is doing. And I think as your last reflection was, it's important when building resilience that it involves a lot of actors, not just the city, but then also the city's resources, the city's people are also part of building this resilience, as well as the skills. So, and from this, I would like to please introduce our next speaker, Rokaya Fall, who is the head of the Office of Cooperation for the City of Dakar in Senegal. Rokaya will reflect on Dakar's efforts to also improve resilience, especially during this time for the COVID pandemic, but then also what happens post the pandemic. You're welcome, Rokaya.
Sorry, Solofina, Rokaya unfortunately had some technical troubles, so we'll return to her hopefully at the end of our speaker list.
All right. Apologies about that. So I think we'd like to go to our next speaker now. I'd like to introduce Junior Bitsomani from Congo Brazzaville. Junior is our next speaker, and he's an assistant monitoring and evaluation officer of projects at the Food and Agriculture Organization in the Republic of Congo. Junior will present and reflect on the management of access to food during confinement in Congo Brazzaville, as well as city engagements through a forum in Brazzaville in the urban food system.
D'accord, merci Solofina. Bon, concernant la ville de Brazzaville, donc je vais vous partager l'expérience qu'a connue la ville de Brazzaville, notamment pour la période qui a concerné, disons, le confinement dans la ville de Brazzaville. Donc, essentiellement, pour cette première partie disons, de mon partage d'expérience, de vous parler et d'échanger sur comment est-ce que la ville a amélioré, disons, sa résilience alimentaire. Et essentiellement, donc il y a eu donc, pendant le début, disons, de la COVID, donc le premier cas a été déclaré à Brazzaville. Brazzaville qui est donc la capitale politique et administrative de la République du Congo et qui compte à peu près de 2 millions d'habitants et 9 arrondissements. Et donc le premier cas a été annoncé, c'était au mois d'avril, le 14, plutôt au mois de mars, le 14 mars. Et donc, c'est venu donc la première, disons, le premier changement qui a été constaté, c'est donc celui de l'annonce, disons, des mesures de confinement et qui a donc créé une grande panique, notamment les achats qui se sont faits en panique, les envahissements des marchés et la hausse des prix qui s'est donc amenée. Et donc, après ça, il y a eu deux principales, disons, décisions qui ont été prises. Et comme vous le savez, Brazzaville étant le siège de la, disons, capitale administrative et politique, donc beaucoup de ministères ont donc pris des décisions, notamment le ministère qui s'occupe donc de la décentralisation, qui gère en effet les municipalités dont celle de Brazzaville. Il y a eu donc, comme il a été dit précédemment, un arrêté qui a modifié donc la première organisation des marchés, donc de 7 jours de marché réguliers par semaine. Donc, les marchés sont passés à 3 jours par semaine. Il y avait donc le lundi, juste le mercredi et le vendredi. Et le marché durait de 6 heures du matin à 14 heures. Et le reste donc de la journée était consacré, le reste des jours était consacré aux désinfections des marchés. Et pour ce faire, il y a donc la deuxième circulaire qui a été prise. C'était donc celle du ministère de l'Agriculture qui a donc pris une circulaire qui ordonnait ou qui encourageait, disons, les acteurs des filières de production agro-pastorale et halieutique à continuer à poursuivre leurs activités de production. Et cette même circulaire s'adressait également auprès donc, des opérateurs et de la police qui a donc pour mandat de réguler, de faire respecter, de réguler toutes les mesures qui étaient prises par le gouvernement pour tout ce qui est circulation, déplacement et mobilité des biens et des services. Donc voilà les deux principales, disons, décisions qu'on a notées qui étaient donc les plus importantes pour le cas donc, de la ville de Brazzaville. Et suite à cela, il y a donc eu des répercussions qu'on a donc constatées. Et parmi ces répercussions, on peut donc noter ou des changements, si vous voulez, des réponses. Il y a principalement, donc, on a constaté que quoi qu'il ait eu, disons, le confinement, sur la base donc de ces deux mesures qui étaient prises, les conditions ou les moyens de production traditionnels n'ont pas eu de changement, notamment dans les zones rurales. Et donc, les agriculteurs, en ce qui s'agisse de la production, ont pu continuer leurs activités pendant toute la durée du confinement. Et la production agricole et urbaine disons, de grandes perturbations. La production en tant que telle. Et on a également remarqué que la ville a occasionné un exode urbain, c'est-à-dire qu'on a vu donc une importante frange de la population qui se trouve donc dans les villes, qui s'est rendue dans les zones rurales. Et fondamentalement, les zones rurales, de manière initiale, sont considérées, de par leur faible démographie, disons des endroits qui ne sont pas, pour le cas du Congo, aptes à encourager la production en raison de la faible densité qu'il y a, donc peu de population pour les étendues de surface de terre qu'il y a. Mais là, disons, la faible densité des zones rurales s'est révélée comme étant une opportunité pour donc gérer toutes les questions de distanciation physique dans les zones rurales et de permettre donc la continuité de la production et des activités en zone rurale parce que la population est faible, donc les populations pourraient circuler. Et d'ailleurs, la cartographie de la contamination l'épidémie au Congo, elle a une orientation urbaine et une orientation rurale. Donc, les zones urbaines, notamment Brazzaville et Pointe-Noire, sont donc les foyers où il y a plus de cas. Et dans les zones rurales, jusqu'à aujourd'hui, nous avons des zones où on trouve encore 0 cas. Donc, voilà un peu un élément sur le rapport rural-urbain en lien avec la pandémie et la production. Et on a aussi vu donc dans les zones urbaines des startups qui sont donc, qui étaient donc au rendez-vous des mesures barrières ou des mesures édictées par le confinement qui ont trouvé donc pour la situation de la Covid une opportunité parce qu'il y a eu donc, elles ont pu se développer et améliorer leur chiffre d'affaires. C'est des startups digitales qui font donc des livraisons à domicile et des ventes en ligne, notamment pour les produits alimentaires. Et elles sont généralement conduites par des jeunes. Elles ont donc conduit un essor. Et nous avons donc aussi observé, disons, la réapparition d'anciens circuits de commercialisation des produits alimentaires qu'on a connus dans les années 90, où il y avait, disons, une récurrence, disons, on peut dire, des crises sociopolitiques. Il y avait une récurrence. Oui, il y avait une.
Merci.
Allô? Vous me recevez?
Hello, Junior. I'd
Oui.
like to please request you to wind up the presentation.
Yes. The first presentation?
Sorry?
I can, you need, I repeat the first presentation?
No, I've been hearing you. I'd like to thank you so much for your presentation, Junior. And I think one important point that I pick up from this is the emergency of agro-entrepreneurs, who are mostly the young people that are taking advantage of the pandemic, or that are seeing the opportunity in the pandemic to develop and create interest in agriculture and food supply. And I think another important thing you note is the issue that food supply is still ongoing, but then it's the logistics that have been interrupted. So I think during our discussion further, these are some of the points that you could touch upon to explain how is the city dealing with this and what are the mitigation measures that the city has come out to address to ensure continued access to food. Thank you so much for your presentation. And this will lead into our next presenter, who is also a city official. I'd like to welcome Jay Ralitera, who is a city official from Antananarivo, and is an advisor. Yes, I can hear you, Jay. Please. Hello.
Oui, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Yes, you can hear you.
Allô?
Please
Oui.
go ahead with your presentation.
Bonjour. Bonjour à tous et merci beaucoup pour ces présentations intéressantes et pleines d'informations, notamment sur comment est-ce que les autres villes et les autres structures peuvent mettre en place des politiques de résilience alimentaire dans leur circonscription. Donc, je m'appelle Zey Ralitera, je suis membre du cabinet du maire sur les questions environnement, développement durable et changement climatique. Et la crise du Covid, pour nous, ça a été un peu l'épreuve du feu, puisqu'on a eu nos élections, le maire a été élu et arrivé au bureau en janvier, un tout petit peu avant la crise du Covid. Donc, c'était la première grosse crise qu'il a eu à mener. Et est-ce qu'on peut mettre ma présentation? Pardon. Je vous présente un petit peu. Je vais vous parler de deux choses globalement. Un peu comment est-ce que le système alimentaire fonctionnait à Antananarivo et ce qu'on aimerait aujourd'hui mettre en place, puisqu'on a commencé à réfléchir à des programmes beaucoup plus long terme et résilients pour l'accès à l'alimentation et améliorer aussi les qualités nutritives pour les habitants d'Antananarivo. Donc, pour redresser un petit peu le portrait de la ville, on a 1,5 million habitants à Tana et 3 millions si on compte la région Anna-la-Mangue. Et une grosse majorité de nos habitants sont quand même des agriculteurs. On produit énormément de riz, on fait aussi de l'agriculture vivrière. Et ce qui s'était passé pendant la crise du Covid, c'était qu'en fait, on n'avait pas forcément de problème d'approvisionnement. Donc, en général, à Tana, ce sont les zones périurbaines qui produisent l'alimentation pour la ville. Et ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'il y a eu un petit peu de spéculation sur les prix, sur certaines denrées. Et donc, un problème qui a été soulevé, c'était de voir comment est-ce que nous, en tant que ville, on peut essayer de contrôler et de réguler et de coordonner les prix pour ne pas que les personnes les plus vulnérables se retrouvent les plus impactées par la potentielle crise. Parce qu'on avait assez à manger, c'était juste de la spéculation des personnes qui avaient peur de ne pas avoir assez. Donc ça a été plutôt psychologique en termes d'impact au niveau de la ville. Après, un des autres soucis qu'on a, enfin un des autres problèmes qu'on essaie de résoudre au niveau de l'approvisionnement de la ville, c'est tout ce qui va être autour des différents points d'intermédiaire pour accéder en fait au marché. Donc, il peut y avoir 4, 5, 6 intermédiaires différents qui font aussi augmenter les prix de la nourriture. Et il faut qu'on puisse réduire ce nombre d'intermédiaires afin de pouvoir impacter aussi sur le prix de ce qui est vendu sur les marchés. Et ce qui avait été fait avant, en 2017 aussi au niveau de la ville, ça avait été de mettre en place des indicateurs pour tout ce qui va être le pacte de Milan. Donc, on avait identifié 6 indicateurs principaux qui sont la gouvernance alimentaire, l'équité économique et sociale, l'alimentation et la nutrition durable, la production alimentaire, l'approvisionnement et production et les déchets alimentaires. Donc ça, c'était un peu les 6 sujets sur lesquels nous, on se focalise aujourd'hui pour construire notre politique alimentaire résiliente. Entre autres problèmes, il y a également tout ce qui va être lié au changement climatique de manière plus générale, donc tout ce qui va être sécheresse, mais aussi le fait qu'on n'utilise pas forcément nos terres en contre-culture. Il y en a beaucoup qui sont mises en jachère, qui sont peut-être moins bien optimisées que ce que ça pourrait être. Et donc, avec tout ça, on s'est posé beaucoup de questions. Et pendant la crise du Covid, là, vous pouvez changer la slide du coup. On s'est focalisé au tout début pour régler la crise sur des dons, en fait, parce que c'est très difficile de confiner les personnes à Madagascar et de leur dire vous n'allez pas pouvoir accéder à vos sources de revenus. Et donc, on a mis en place un système de dons, notamment pour les taxis, les bus et les personnes très, très vulnérables qu'on a pu identifier pour pouvoir leur donner accès à ce qu'on appelle ici des PPN, des produits de première nécessité. Donc, ça va être le riz, l'huile, du savon, des choses qui leur permettent de tenir et de vivre. Et on a aussi mis en place un programme pour réorganiser et coordonner au mieux les marchés. Donc, on a 6 gros marchés ici. Et l'idée pour nous, ce serait de mettre en place un lieu central qui permettrait d'approvisionner les marchés et de réduire le nombre d'intermédiaires et de mieux coordonner du coup ces zones d'approvisionnement alimentaire. Et donc, avec tout ça, on a décidé de partir sur plusieurs types de projets, notamment, donc on parlait beaucoup d'agriculture résiliente avec la FAO, donc un programme de SARU, qui est une plateforme qui va mettre en place plusieurs acteurs différents pour pouvoir les faire travailler ensemble. Et notamment, l'une des principales, je dirais, un des principaux objectifs aussi, c'est de travailler avec le secteur privé. Donc, c'est peut-être là aussi, j'en ai pas encore entendu parler dans les présentations, mais du coup, au niveau de la ville de Tana, on aimerait bien travailler et on a commencé déjà à travailler avec le secteur privé afin qu'il puisse aider à mettre en place des solutions, que ce soit… donc, on essaie de réfléchir à différents modèles qui pourraient permettre au secteur privé, que ce soit les startups, mais aussi les grosses entreprises ou les PME, de pouvoir participer à une certaine mesure à la coordination et peut-être que ce soit eux les prestataires de services de certains points de meilleure distribution de l'alimentation. On a aussi envie de mettre en place au sein de nos écoles publiques des jardins potagers. Donc, on est en train de travailler sur ce principe-là avec au sein du service agriculture urbaine de la commune d'Antananarivo. Et donc, mettre en place des jardins potagers qui soient dans les écoles, mais aussi au niveau des privés, dans les espaces publics, afin de multiplier les points d'accès et les sources de production au sein de la ville. Donc, pour pouvoir un peu aussi désengorger peut-être certaines zones et pouvoir permettre à des personnes d'accéder plus rapidement et de façon plus directe à certains types de produits. Parce que, par exemple, si on parle de jardin potager dans les écoles, on pourrait là-bas produire ce qui est nécessaire et très rapide à produire, et en plus, entraîner les enfants et les personnels des écoles à être autonomes sur certains types de produits. Donc, c'est une approche qu'on a envie de tester au niveau de la ville. On va aussi mettre en place un programme de cantine scolaire. Et là, c'est vraiment basé sur les entreprises du secteur privé.
Jay, I'd like to please request you to wind up the presentation with some reflections.
Oui, ok, c'est parfait. Et donc, au niveau de tous nos projets, ce qu'on peut conclure, c'est qu'au niveau de la ville d'Antananarivo, nos principaux objectifs, ça va être la coordination des marchés et des accès à la nourriture, mais également l'implication de différents acteurs comme le secteur privé et les institutions, et aussi l'aide des habitants pour pouvoir mettre en place un système résilient qui soit basé sur aussi bien des petites entités très locales comme les jardins potagers en ville, mais aussi sur une meilleure répartition et une meilleure organisation de nos approvisionnements périurbains, notamment avec de la contre-culture.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and I think you raised one important point is that for a food policy to be successful, you need to bring all actors on board, and especially for your city, you mentioned that private actors play a very important role. So this should be brought more into the conversation. So let's hear from Kampala City how they're also managing to make the balance between the private and the public, but then also how the city is dealing with long-term and then short-term resilience strategies. I'd like to welcome Eso Galukande from the Kampala Capital City Authority to please share some insights from Kampala City.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers of this webinar to give us yet another opportunity to share what is happening in Kampala City. Well, I'll start off by informing the listeners that I'll talk about resilience of cities through urban farming and what we've learned in Kampala City. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, I just want to give some facts about the city. Regarding our population, we have 5 million people during the daytime in the city, and those that stay in the city at night, about 2 million. Then food in the city, most of it comes from the countryside, but it's distributed through permanent markets. We have mobile markets that move in different locations of the city. Then we have seasonal markets that maybe once a month that have certain foods, and then also the supermarkets. Now, something interesting about Kampala is that we do urban farming in the city. It is widespread. It is estimated that there are about 80,000 households that produce one type of food. Basically, we're looking at the leafy vegetables. We're looking at milk from cattle grazed and zero grazing units, and also poultry, eggs, and meat birds. And then we're looking at piggery as well. Now, the city also has ordinances that aim at an ordinary food production in the city. So we have a set of 5 of them that guide whoever wants to do urban farming to do it in a way that is orderly. Now, why have we been promoting urban farming as a city? We have seen and learned that if it's well planned, it can provide a continuous supply of food, regardless of what is happening around. Then it can also make substantial household savings. Most of the homes involved in producing one kind of food actually save from having to buy from the market. It can also create additional income. We are looking at some of the household units that actually farm excess of what they need and are able to sell to the neighbors, so they get some income. It also assists in recycling the urban waste. Some of the market waste can go into farmyard manure and recycled back into nutrients for food production. It also stimulates development of related programs. It means that if I grow certain things and then bulk them, then we can actually have somebody transport them to the next consumer. So we're having a chain of employment being created. and then it enables utilization of the small spaces for food production. We do have some areas that can be used for food production that if they're not utilized, they'll actually be left idle. So in what way has the city been promoting urban farming? First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we enacted farming ordinances, which are meant to guide on how it can be done. Then, as part of government programs, we've been distributing startup inputs to farmers. These are in-kind technologies. We sensitize farmers on possible enterprises in the city, and we can give them inputs, which could be seedlings or start gardens, or even mushroom startup kits. So since 2012, we have been able to support 10,492 farmers. Then we provide extension services. In the different divisions of Kampala, 5 of them, we have extension workers specializing in crops, in livestock, in fisheries, that do home visits and train and also do backup support. So in a typical year, we can do about 4,000 such visits. Then we have also set up an urban farm resource center, which is set on 33 acres of land. It provides farmer training. It does demonstration of the different technologies. And we are also producing high quality inputs for the farmers. These are seedlings. We have brooded chicks for farmers, and we're also breeding piglets that are high value for the farmers. We're also supporting conventional and mobile marketing platforms for food. Now, just to mention, these farmers, we have entered a good number of them on the database, and we're able to find market prices and share with them on this database. Then also during the lockdown, we're able to have a system of linking those who would be at home to link to the markets through a mixture of the informal sector and the formal sector and government. So how has COVID-19 affected or enforced the approaches that I mentioned earlier? First of all, with the lockdown, there was reduced mobility. That resulted in reduced amount of food to the markets, and then reduced the mobility of public to the city markets. Now that has resulted in higher food prices, but then it has also brought about another situation. First of all, it has increased utilization of mobile marketing platforms. This is the use of the e-commerce operators that you can actually order food on mobile phone, either by physical calls or using applications. And by the end of April this year, we had 20,000 users that are frequent using this facility. I think the number has increased. We need to do more studies to find out how this has progressed as the ease has come up. Then we've seen a rapid increase in urban farming. There are many more households that are producing one kind of product now, new ones. We can actually gauge from our seedling production unit. We've had a 25% increase in orders of seedlings and poultry products. Then also we have the informal roadside vendors of seedlings, the ones that are on the roadside, and we have seen them increase by at least 100% fold. We've had increased calls to the extension workers for on-farm visit and inspection. And then also our advisory services have also increased. We have registered at least 3,000 farmers, and we have been able to look at what kind of products they are producing through a GIS platform. What are we looking at going forward? We want to consolidate the gains of urban farming, and we want to increase the numbers of farmers involved in this activity and also increase their inputs. To this end, we're in collaboration with the government of Netherlands, and we're doing a citywide study to look at which direction we should go, and this resource center, how it can be an epicenter for promoting urban farming. We also want to promote the use and wide use of e-commerce platforms for food marketing and for food orders for people who cannot come to the markets. We want to demystify it further to the residents of the city. We're also looking at establishing a system that will provide information to urban producers about market prices. I just put some pictures of some of the units that you'll see in the city. And on the left is just a simple tomato farmer in one of the divisions. On the right, we have an aquaponic system of leafy vegetables and fish farming in a tank. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Esso, for your presentation, and then also for the demonstration of what is happening in Kampala. And I think as one who has grown up and worked in Kampala, I totally understand when you say that food is really part of the household. So it would be interesting to know how the city is promoting this at a planning level to ensure that this is promoted across all households, both the formal and informal. So I'd like to go to our next presenter, Gilchrist. Gilchrist is a county minister in charge of agriculture, livestock and fisheries from the county government of Kisumu. Welcome, Gilchrist, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Solofina. Yeah, we are trying to, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I hope Paul will bring on board what I have. It's a very short presentation, but I just want to give a highlight that Kisumu is the third largest city in Kenya, sitting on the shores of Lake Victoria to the west of the country. Kisumu County is both city and rural in that it encompasses several 35 wards, which constitute our political demarcations. So as a city, we have 3 wards within the city. Basically, Kisumu has been a food-reliant city for a while because it gets most of its food from the hinterland. With the COVID-19, we were very unfortunate that at the same time that we've been fighting the COVID-19, we also had floods in a number of places. So we had a double tragedy as a county and as a city, where most of the larger part of the bread basket of the city was washed away by floods. So the efforts that we have put in place for food resilience are as follows. We've had food system assessment, where we provide evidence-based information for the development of food strategy. And this has been largely supported by FAO under the Urban Food Systems Project. We have also been identifying and supporting inclusive groups and farmer cooperatives within the city who have really supported in post-economic. We don't want to talk of post-economic per se, but as you all realize, COVID is here for a long while. So we want to see how we live with it. We have enhanced provision of agricultural extension support services, especially the inclusion of online services and social media. We have provided our farmers with quality subsidized agricultural inputs like seeds and fertilizer. We've also introduced innovative urban farming technologies like micro gardens, poultry farming, for which require small space. We have also introduced fish cage farming within the city, where people cage their fish in ponds. We have also come up with innovative agri-food systems in which we have incorporated a number of the youth who were previously unemployed, and we've brought them actively engaged in agriculture. We have equally reclaimed some of the wetlands which were on the peri-urban parts of our city as measures in which we could build food resilience for the city. The next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, the pandemic has really been hard on us because we have had to change a number of ways in which we do a number of things. There exists a glut in the market with the closure, just as Morrison had already observed, with the closure of the eateries and outlets. We've had a glut in the market where a number of the farmers have suffered heavy losses through having, for instance, the poultry farmers who had mature chicken, but because of the disruption in the entire value chain, they could not get access to the markets. we've had interruption of food-related logistical services, like when two of our major cities were closed, that is Nairobi and Mombasa. When they underwent a lockdown, they happened to be a major market for our produce as a city, especially the fish and poultry. So in this way, we've had to live with losses which the farmers incurred as a result of not being able to access their usual markets. The supply chain disruption of the eateries and markets have already hinted to that. The need for social distancing has also limited the number of farmers that can be trained. This has really pulled back our efforts in that our field outreach services have more or less been hindered by lack of organization of the trainings that we used to have, where we used to have a number of farmers attending. We've had loss of agriculture livelihood related jobs due to the close of businesses and movement restrictions. As you are aware, in Kenya, we've had curfew, which has meant that there are limitations in movement and times of movement. We've also had the closure of those major markets that I've already hinted to. We've also had less time for trading, in that as our people move from point A to B, for a long time, they were restricted up to 7 p.m. Most of our markets within the city rely on the evenings to do their sales. So this also closed in a gap, which ordinarily was a big source of market for our produce. We've also had the floods, which I already hinted to, but we are trying to cope, and we are partnering with a number of associations, the churches included, to bring on board as many people and as many youth as possible, especially the youth and the women groups who we are targeting through the churches, so that we can build some comeback as we go forward. So in partnership with FAO, the food systems, plans are underway in supporting the value chain actors, which we hope definitely will mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
No, most definitely. So, I agree with that.
You.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And as we wrap up for today, I think we're seeing a lot of the impacts are starting from across the different cities in Africa. And I think at the end we'll reflect upon this. I'd like to invite our last speaker for today. That is Rokhaya Fall, who is the head of Office of Cooperation from the city of Dakar in Senegal. Welcome, Rokhaya.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, I can hear you, and please, limited times. Please,
okay, je suis là.
Yeah.
Vous m'entendez bien?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ok, d'accord. Je voudrais faire une présentation de la ville de Dakar. D'abord, je vous présente la croissance démographique. La ville, elle a une population de 1 326 200 habitants avec une surface de 82,32 km². Pour la densité, on a 16 563 habitants par km². Pour la résilience urbaine, donc, la ville a mis en place un projet dénommé micro-jardinage. Pour ce projet, on a formé plus de 9 694 personnes. Ils ont gratuitement bénéficié de cette formation. On a aussi des centres de formation au niveau de chaque commune d'arrondissement. Pour les communes d'arrondissement, chaque commune a un centre de formation. Donc, en tout, on a 24 encadreurs donc, qui ont formé les bénéficiaires pour le projet micro-jardinage. Pour le COVID-19, donc Dakar, il a participé à l'élan de solidarité nationale qu'on a donné au gouvernement du Sénégal, chèque de 100 millions de francs CFA. On a fait des remises de matériel d'hygiène et de protection aux structures de santé de la ville, donc en appui en denrées alimentaires aux 19 communes et aux populations nécessiteuses.
Hello, Rokaya. We seem to have dropped our presenter. Hello.
Allô?
Okay, good. I can hear you now.
OK. Avec la crise, beaucoup de secteurs sont affectés, donc notamment avec la baisse des revenus, le chômage, l'alimentation devient moins riche et variée. On a aussi des réductions de rémunération. À cet effet, on a mené des campagnes de sensibilisation pour renforcer les approches du COVID-19. Donc, produits locaux dont les achats sont créés dans la production agricole pour essayer d'assurer la souveraineté alimentaire.
Hello, it seems like our presenter is having internet problems. Hi, Rokaya, can you hear me?
Local pour être moins dépendant. On est en train de voir comment accélérer les programmes d'autosuffisance alimentaire et essayer
Hello, we seem to be having connectivity problems from our speaker from Senegal.
J'ai des problèmes d'internet. Voilà ce qu'on compte faire dans l'avenir.
All right. Maybe Rokaya, we can come back to you with a question with regard to Dakar. Thank you so much for your presentation, and our apologies for that. So I think we'll give a chance to the speaker to reflect and give a few conclusions.
Ce que j'avais à dire sur les actions qu'on a faites par rapport à... D'accord, OK.
All right. So we're going to move over to the discussion section, and we'll go back to our presenter from Dakar with some questions, those who are particularly interested. And if not, some of the questions will be addressed thereafter, and we shall forward feedback from the different presenters. So now I would like to go into the discussion section, and would like to make this as interactive as possible. There are some questions that have already been posted in the Q&A, and I'd like to start with some of these. So one of our first questions is addressed to Dr. Jamie. and it's really requesting for a reflection on, it's based on the wide number of inputs to the survey across the continent. So what is your outlook for the future resilience of Africa's urban food system? And I'd like to request our presenters to please make a brief reflection so that we can hear from different speakers. And please switch on your cameras, panelists. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Jaime, are you able to hear the question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. I was just waiting for the others to come on screen. Yeah, in terms of the future resilience of food systems, I think this is a very interesting questions because, you know, before COVID hit earlier this year, we've been doing a lot of work in trying to push forward an agenda of food system transformation to ensure that food systems are more sustainable, more inclusive and more resilient. But what we found is that over the years, even though there have been a lot of attempts by governments, by private sector, by civil society to push forward better food systems, it was really the lack of coherence between these actions which have prevented any major transformation. So I think with COVID hitting, what we're seeing now is that different actors are understanding the need to work together. This often happens in crisis periods. Obviously, we're reacting to something which is extreme in the moment, but if we can carry that forward into the future developments of our food systems, then I think that could be quite promising. So as we respond and put in measures to recover from the immediate impacts of the virus, we need to be thinking about how we can use those to stimulate the transformation towards more resilient food systems in the future. So I think, yeah, some of the signals are quite positive. It's not going to be easy because particularly as we move through the phases of the pandemic, we're going to see a significant recession, which is going to hit particularly vulnerable groups. And it's going to make it more difficult to make some of the changes we want to do in terms of the sustainability of food systems. But if we can take advantage of that energy, the fact that different actors are coming together, whether it be in food policy councils in municipal areas, or whether it be at the national level or even the global level, then I think there's some hope for improving resilience longer term. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. And as you point out, the West is yet to come. So I guess as cities, then you have to be prepared, you know, whatever is coming, but then also to think in more long term and, you know, think with other actors that are also planning with food. Thank you so much for your input. So there's a question for Junior from so the inquiries are cities working together to address some of these challenges. You know, if Brazzaville cannot access food, how is it working with the neighboring cities to ensure that they can still access food?
Bon, merci pour la question. Il était recommandé que les villes travaillent, il est recommandé que les villes travaillent de concert, mais pour Brazzaville, j'ai fait montre dans ma présentation qu'il n'y avait pas en vrai, disons, un problème. L'accès a été facilité par, disons, les décisions qui ont été prises, notamment cette circulaire que j'évoquais qui autorisait, disons, de faciliter la circulation. Mais quand bien même qu'il y a eu cette circulation, on a rencontré des difficultés, notamment des acteurs très importants comme, par exemple, la police, qui ont trouvé de ça comme une opportunité d'ériger, disons, des postes de contrôle supplémentaires en dehors en plus des péages, et ce qui a donc compliqué un peu l'approvisionnement des aliments et le coût qui a contribué à l'augmentation des prix. Non seulement qu'il n'y avait plus beaucoup de moyens de transport, donc la logistique était le point faible de cette crise dans la distribution alimentaire, dans le système alimentaire. Et disons, il y a eu des acteurs comme la police qui n'a pas aidé à un certain moment, mais disons, l'administration a réglé cette question. Mais en tout cas, le contact, disons, les relations urbaines et rurales ont été parfaitement au rendez-vous, que ce soit la zone rurale comme lieu de refuge de certains acteurs qui ne pouvaient plus tenir pour l'économie qui se grippaient dans le milieu urbain, mais en même temps aussi dans la zone rurale qui a été donc un Eldorado, si on peut dire, de la production au regard des conditions, des faiblesses qui sont reconnues en situation initiale, donc la faible densité due à l'exode rural. Mais là, les zones rurales étaient donc moins sous les pressions des mesures de confinement et donc ont pu ravitailler, mais la logistique a fait défaut et jusqu'à pendant un certain mois, disons, les complications policières pour faciliter la circulation des biens et produits alimentaires des zones rurales vers les villes.
All right. No, thank you so much, Jenny. I think during that you raised quite important points to reflect upon. What are the other factors within cities that can make the connection between the city and the city region strong? The issue of transport and logistics, and I think that is one important that can improve connection between cities. So, so there's a question here for Mayor Araujo. You have said that local government is at the forefront of change. What do you understand your role as mayor in providing guidance towards making your city more resilient?
Well, first of all, I think the role of local leaders is that of providing the vision, providing the leadership. Because if there is no leadership, then all initiatives may not achieve the expected aims. So like number one will be to provide the leadership. The second is to create the enabling environment where different stakeholders can come together to put in place the necessary instruments that those stakeholders can use in order to achieve the objective. So to me, those two will be the main role of local governments. First of all, to provide leadership, and second, to create the enabling environment where other stakeholders, other interested institutions can operate.
No, absolutely. That is quite important, especially in creating the enabling environment. And you see that the difference between cities is really the environment within which the different actors can act to be able to create resilience or other strategies that the cities are working on. Thank you so much, Mayor. And
but also, I mean, local governments can create policies. You know, I think having one of the ways of creating an enabling environment is that of initiating policies and also having initiatives so that, you know, to invite institutions that probably, if not brought in, they wouldn't otherwise be part, because there are several institutions with potential, with resources, be human or financial, but that may not have either the willingness or the vision to engage. So it's necessary that local governments take the first step in inviting those institutions, in showing them the vision and the way forward.
No, absolutely, absolutely. That is quite important. And to our attendees today, we might extend 10 minutes just to allow for further discussion. So please, if you'd like to stay with us in the extension, you're welcome. And we ask you to engage in the chat and then the question and answer section, so that we can answer your questions now or later on via email. So there's a question for Jay, and so this touches upon the policy, as Mayor has been saying. So Tana has been working well on developing the Food Policy Council. But then how has this policy approach supported the long-term planning? and how is it supporting even the short-term responses during the current crisis?
Alors, pour répondre à cette question, aujourd'hui, on travaille effectivement sur notre politique à long terme. Et c'est ça qui est le plus important parce que, comme j'avais dit, nous venons juste d'entrer on vient juste d'être élu et de mettre en place plusieurs politiques et il a fallu répondre à la crise de façon très, très brève et très courte. Donc ça, c'est pour ça qu'on a demandé notamment l'appui du secteur privé et aussi des habitants pour nous aider à régler la crise, sachant que, entre-temps, nos équipes travaillaient pour mettre en place des politiques long terme sur les questions d'alimentation et de répartition de tout ça. Donc aujourd'hui, on est encore très, très tôt pour savoir si nos politiques qu'on a choisies vont fonctionner sur 5-10 ans. Mais c'est l'objectif qu'on s'est fixé et de pouvoir faire en sorte que peu importe ce qui arrive, peu importe les nouvelles crises, qu'elles soient climatiques, sanitaires, qu'elles soient économiques, on puisse mettre en place un système de distribution, d'approvisionnement et de contrôle, de coordination d'accès aux aliments de base qui soit juste et équitable pour tous et qui soit pérenne. C'est vraiment l'objectif qu'on s'est fixé. Je ne sais pas si ça répond bien à la question, mais c'est notre objectif. Et pour ça, on croit très fort au partenariat privé-public, partenariat avec les institutions. C'est très important pour nous d'impliquer tous les acteurs.
No, totally, Jay, and I think Antananarivo would like to follow the progress, you know, and hear how what is the outcome of this policy and how is the city changing with the changing environment, to either develop the policy or to see what works and doesn't work for the city and change accordingly. So thanks for sharing. So there's a question for Essol, and it's regarding with the urban agriculture. So you mentioned that a lot of households have taken up the practice, I think up to 80,000 households. So what about the informal households or the households that don't have so much of a backyard? How is the city trying to incorporate this into the urban agriculture practices?
Thank you very much. First of all, we should realize that urban farming works in very small pieces of land. You don't need a big backyard to practice urban farming. Some of the ways in which food is grown is in sacks, which are less than 1 meter in diameter. So that can happen even on just offside of a veranda. Now, one thing I want to clarify is that urban farming cannot replace food produced in the countryside. I did mention in the beginning that we have 5 million people living in the city during the daytime, and there's no way you can produce food enough for those people. There are certain food products that cannot be produced in the city, like the tubers, like the rice, like even maize, but there's quite a lot of the leafy vegetables that can be produced in buckets, in sacks, in what we call tower gardens, and also in small tracts of land. We're talking about even spaces, let me call them spaces. We're talking about spaces of about 2 meters diameter or even 2 meters by 5 meters, and you can produce much more food than a family can consume. Now, the practice is quite widespread, and it's quite fascinating to know that Kampala is almost 90% sufficient in poultry products. There are more than 1 million chicken in Kampala, according to the last census, and most of the eggs consumed in Kampala are produced actually within the city. So it is quite widespread. Does not require large tracts of land. We actually don't call them farms, we call them production units because of the size. There could be boxes or anything. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much. And as you hint, it's really what works for the city. By the mere fact that it can be grown on smaller units, then it is one of the better solutions for providing immediate food needs for households. So there's an interesting question for Gilchrist, and this is one that has been hinted upon earlier, that the smaller cities or secondary cities are surviving better, or they're more resilient than the larger cities. So Gilchrist, is there a way large African cities to learn from all the benefits that have arisen in small towns can only occur in such environments. Hello? Should I repeat the question, Gilchrist?
Sorry, I lost connectivity for a short while.
All right. So the question is
just back.
All right.
Yeah.
No, come back. The question is there a way for large African cities to learn from the smaller towns or from the secondary cities, or the benefits that have arisen in small towns can only occur in such environments? Hello? Hello? That was the question. What are the lessons that the smaller cities can learn what are the lessons that the larger cities can learn from the smaller African cities in terms of resilience? Hello? Hello, Gilchrist, can you hear me? Okay, I will come back to you, to Gilchrist, and we'll have a question for Rokaya. Hello, Rokaya.
Hello.
Hello. So thank you for joining us, and I think this question we'll move it to you, and so the question is how can urban agriculture policies be incorporated into the overall planning policies of cities? Because we've noticed that some of these are happening very randomly, but not well integrated into the overall city policies.
Vous pouvez répéter la question parce que je n'ai pas pu accéder à la traduction.
All right. So the question is particularly for Dakar. How are you able to incorporate urban agriculture practices into the overall city policy to ensure that it is not happening?
D'accord. Pour Dakar, on coopère avec d'autres villes. Donc, on coopère avec d'autres villes africaines dans le cadre de nos projets. Mais concernant le COVID-19, on n'a pas pu harmoniser nos actions. Mais pour les autres projets de la ville, on a travaillé avec certaines villes. Dakar a aidé certaines villes à pratiquer, par exemple, notre projet micro-jardinage. Donc, notamment la ville de Praia, la ville de Banjul, donc la ville de Ouagadougou, entre autres. Donc, les villes ont expérimenté l'expérience de la ville de Dakar en ce qui concerne le projet micro-jardinage. Donc, mais pour le COVID-19, on n'a pas encore harmonisé nos actions, mais on compte le faire, partager nos expériences avec ces villes et aussi nous aussi expérimenter les expériences des autres villes concernant aussi le COVID-19. Mais concernant notre projet de résilience, on a travaillé avec ces villes, quelques villes africaines.
And thank you so much for your contribution, Rukaya. And I think it is important that I think cities are not isolated, but they work hand in hand with other cities to realize their goals. So we have a lot of questions coming in the Q&A as well as the chat, and we shall pause. we shall forward this to our presenters to be able to answer them, and then we can forward them to you by email. So thank you so much for presenting and for attending today's webinar. And I think it has been a very interactive one. We've been able to hear from our cities and from our partners. And so for a closing, I'd like to hand over to Paul, our Senior Professional Officer, and he will wrap up the discussion as well as reflection and way forward from today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Solofina, and I wish to extend some huge thanks to our speakers. Time always disappears way too quickly, so we'll have to reflect on how better to enable discussion. I think, as usual, there are too many points to go through when you bring up the topic of food, and we certainly believe that food is one of the best inroads for making wide social change. So as Solofina has mentioned, we will forward some of the questions to our speakers, who, if they will indulge us, can share back some further insights, especially for those whose presentations were hampered with some of the connectivity. I'd like to share quickly an event coming up as part of African City Food Month, which is the Food Dialogues in Cape Town, and they are open to wide African city participation to share their insights. That'll be from the 27th of July. And to provide a final overview of our further webinars coming up, we really do invite you to join. And perhaps we can start our next webinar by addressing a few of the questions that have come in today. Our next one is Nourishing Our Cities, as next week will be a theme of nutrition and how we create food environments that properly enhance nutrition for our citizens. I do see a number of hands going up. Please do forward your thoughts or questions to us. We'll share our contacts in our follow-up. Thank you very much for the engagement.